Well, time sure does fly when we are all having fun. It is 2 o'clock here in Colorado, and it is time to introduce the last speaker of the day. For those of you who may not have been able to attend all day, welcome to the Multi-State Virtual Conference. My name is Christine Krieger, and I will be your host for this session, which features Howard County Library System's experience of producing a successful human library event and other key current elements in the Choose Civility campaign. The sessions today are supported through funding from the Colorado State Library, the Georgia State Library Service, the State Library of Iowa, the Maryland State Library, and the Library Services and Technology Act through the Institute of Museum and Library Services. Very quickly, before we get started, this session is being recorded and archived. A link will be sent out next week with access to the archived session. If you happen to be watching this session in a group, we would love to hear about it so that we can have an accurate head count for our records. This allows us to continue to advocate for workshops such as this. So please make note of your additional people so that we can collect that information from you later. You will have an opportunity to submit questions via text for our presenters. You can type them into the Q&A panel. And you also can receive continuing education units for this session and the other sessions that you may have attended today. It will be the last page in the survey that we send out to you. You should get it when you log out of the session today, or we will be emailing links to the survey later on, probably by Friday. So without further ado, we are honored to have with us today Allison Jessing. Allison joined the Howard County Library System as the Events and Seminars Manager in 2015. Previously, Allison was an interpretive educator at the Smithsonian Institution for 9 years, where she developed collections that inspired engagement and education opportunities. So now I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Allison. Thank you for being here today.
Hello? Hello, how is everybody? Thank you all for sticking around for the last presentation of the day. I just wanted to thank Nini and Dorcas for all of their help with this conference. I've learned so much today, and I'm very excited to talk to you about our Choose Civility initiative at Howard County. I wanted to kind of just give you a little bit of background on what Choose Civility is and how it ties into our human library. This initiative started actually in 2006, about a good 9-10 years before I joined Howard County Library System during a professional development day when the professional development day speaker was Johns Hopkins University professor Dr. P.M. Forney, who wrote a book called Choosing Civility, the 25 Rules of Considerate Conduct, and acted as our keynote speaker. There was a lot of interest among the staff about how we could use his background on his book and his theories into creating something tangible, because the library system, along with a lot of other organizations, wanted something that we could apply in our day-to-day lives, how we interact with each other, how we interact with our community, how we interact with our customers. So they started planning what this would look like. So Choose Civility at that time was not a direct response to any specific community issue or event. It was just a recognition that we can always do better in our daily interactions, and how we can appreciate reminders of compassion, and how we can consciously work toward improving our quality of life. So we started with this vision and mission statement. So the goal of Choose Civility is to create a community-wide initiative with the library leading the way in partnership with different nonprofit, faith-based, governmental, and private organizations within our community, all holding up a model of civility. The idea being to enhance respect, empathy, consideration, and tolerance in Howard County. We have revised that mission statement and that value system as time goes on, and we're always evolving and looking at our word choice and how we can define and expand our understanding and compassion within the scope of the project. Anyone within the community and people all throughout Maryland, all throughout the region, are invited to participate and take part in the Choose Civility initiative. And we've discussed a lot, what is our value system that goes into Choose Civility? What are we upholding? What do we recognize in our community as our strengths? And what do we want to strive towards? And what do we want to achieve with that? And some of those things you'll see in our mission statement: valuing diversity, choosing respect, compassion, and empathy, and valuing inclusiveness as an essential part of our life in Howard County. So the book was the 25 Rules of Considerate Conduct, but we boiled that down to 15 principles that we encourage our customers to engage with, that we encourage our staff to model, and that we emphasize within the community. Each year, our Choose Civilian initiative has a different theme. Past years have been sportsmanship or digital citizenship. But in 2016, during what we all remember as a very tense election year, we decided that in response to just the community tension, the angriness that we were feeling, the angriness we were seeing online, that we wanted to emphasize compassion and empathy. So we opted to make our theme Choose to Be Kind. We don't really see that there's much value in pretending that we're a community that all holds hands and sings Kumbaya 24/7. That's not a reality. We think that acknowledging things going on in the community that are tense, that are less than ideal, are good ways to address it and give people the skills to work through those issues. So we developed a lineup of classes and events and initiatives to bring this concept of kindness into the community. And that included a hackathon for middle schoolers, high schoolers, and college students, where we spent a day doing hacks and coding projects to build apps and other computer-based solutions for nonprofits in our community that needed technology solutions to address their issues. We purchased hundreds of copies of the 25 Rules of Choose Civility and numbered them and scattered them through the community. The idea being that you would read it and then pass it on to somebody else. So our community has a lot of little free libraries. So we stocked the little free libraries with copies of Choose Civility. We put them in the auto mechanics waiting room, the dentist's office, anywhere people might be sitting and need something to read. And we encourage people through book plates to read the book and then give it to somebody else. We actually created a Google map for that, and we've been able to track them all throughout the country as they're passed along. We used the Choose2Bkind hashtag as a sidewalk art and a bumper sticker campaign, which was very successful. We had our human library, which I will talk about in more detail. We also invited social secretaries from, pardon me, the Obama administration and the George W. Bush's administration to come and speak as to how can people who maybe have ideological or principled differences still be kind to each other. And that was a very well-attended address or talk. Fake news, it's been around for a million years. We all know that. But it was very much in the zeitgeist, so we developed a class that could teach our customers how to identify it and how to address it. We also started community dialogue circles. Now, these were conversation circles led by trained facilitators that taught people how to have calm conversations. It's almost a lost art where we just don't yell at each other in all caps. And that became something we wanted to encourage people to embrace, is this concept of civil, compassionate dialogue, how to listen to something that you disagree with and respectfully disagree with it, how to respond to something that you disagree with, and how to develop an understanding of compassion for somebody that you don't agree with. How can you see beyond just your differences to identify each other as people? One of our very successful classes was also a series, Understanding and Supporting Transgender and Gender Nonconforming Youth. So that was a class that we offered to parents and teens and educators. So we focus on proper use of pronouns, language identifiers, how to just be a friend and understand. It's a safe place to ask questions, a safe place to learn about the transgender community and how you can be an ally to that community. And then the last thing we did was the longest table, which I will also talk about in more detail. But basically, we threw a dinner party for the whole county and had 300 people show up. It was pretty fun. But I really want to focus on the human library today. So HCLS, Howard County Library System, was the first public library in Maryland to host a human library. Some of our local academic libraries had also done them. I think Johns Hopkins and I think Towson had also done one. Towson University in Maryland had also done one. But this is one of our signature events for the year. So the Human Library, if you've not heard of this, is an international initiative designed to build this framework for conversation that overcomes stereotypes, that promote inclusivity and compassion, and help us dispel prejudice, bias, and stereotyping through conversation. So to frame Howard County, we are a wonderful, loving community, but we often exist in bubbles, and we only associate, talk to, and see other people who we are like. So the idea of the Human Library was that we would bring people together with those who were not in their bubble so that they would have a chance to meet somebody and speak with somebody they may not otherwise encounter in their day-to-day life. And through that empathy, through that conversation and interaction, they would begin to see each other just as people and not as this mysterious or unknown or scary stereotype that they might have in mind. So we knew that this would be a difficult project to pull off, but we thought it was very much worth the effort. So in a human library, you have human people as your books. Readers who come in and they borrow a human book for a length of time, and then they have this conversation. And that was just kind of our thesis statement going in. And we contacted the Human Library organization, which is in Copenhagen, and asked to be enrolled as an official Human Library venue. That took about 3 months. So the background on the Human Library, just let me go a little deeper. This actually began at a music festival in 2000 in Copenhagen in response to racial tension within the community there. The original event was 8 hours a day for 4 days straight and had 50 titles, human books. So that broad selection of books allowed readers a lot of choice in challenging their stereotypes in interacting with different people. And they had more than 1,000 participants in that first Human Library in Copenhagen in 2000. So we started with a recruitment call for Human Library books within our community. We published a quarterly events guide. The image you see on the screen now was the cover of our Source magazine with 3 of our human books. Farida, who is a woman of the Muslim faith, Reed, a gentleman, United States military veteran with PTSD, and Farida, who is a Parsi Zoroastrian. And they were 3 of our earliest applicants, so we put them on the cover. We received about 28 applications for human books. People filled out an application online, and we contacted them. A few withdrew once we started the conversation about what our goals for the project were. A couple others we declined to invite as books, but encouraged them to participate as readers. We had aimed for 10 books total, and we ended with 17, including our county executive, Alan Kittleman, who was one of our books. Some of the other titles in our Human Library included people with bipolar disorder and depression, a person with an invisible illness, members of the LGBT community, immigrants, and a lot of other wonderful people who volunteered their stories. We weren't sure if people would respond to this. Would they want to come out and tell these very personal stories? And they did. There was an overwhelming response. So this was our committee. We were really busy on the day of the Human Library, and we forgot to get a picture all together, but 3 of us worked on this for almost a year to pull this one day off. Alan Simpson, our assistant manager at our Savage branch, was the person who brought this idea to the table and proposed it. It was a wonderful idea, and all credit is due to Alan for that. Rohini Gupta is our adult curriculum specialist, and she is the organizational mastermind that pulled all of these people and schedules together. And then there's me just doing paperwork there. So this was not a very expensive initiative to execute. Our expenses were mostly related to small gifts for our books and food and snacks. But if you're thinking about doing this at your library, just be aware that it is a large investment of staff time. We spent probably anywhere from 5 hours to 30 hours a week per person working on this. It was a lot of staff time. So it takes a lot of commitment and a lot of keeping things just in line and organized. And I see a question, can we share your book application? Yes, we can. We did it through Google Forms, so we can, I can share that with you by email. I can send you a link to this. And I can give you my email address later. So we had them fill that application online, and then what we would do was we would set up a phone interview with people. We wanted them to know what they were volunteering for. Again, we're asking a lot of them to put themselves really out there, so we wanted to make that expectation known and, you know, find boundaries and just make sure everybody was comfortable with the process. So two of the three of us would get on every call just to make sure that the person that we were interviewing was clear on what our expectations were and that we were clear of their expectations of us. And during those phone interviews, we asked them about their experiences and why they wanted to share their story with others. And almost without fail, every time people would say, I feel myself misrepresented all the time. I want to turn those misunderstandings into learning opportunities. Now, along with the investment of staff time, I would also caution you about just the emotional burden of planning this. It is not an easy thing to plan because you're going to hear a lot of stories that break your heart. Almost every one of these interviews, I would have to go in my office and cry. You hear stories from people who were abused, who were victims of genocide, hate crimes, just very, very difficult emotional stories. That we were really having very intimate experiences with. It really taught me a lot about my community and the strength of the people within it. And these are just people that saw our call for human books and volunteered. These are teachers, engineers, homemakers, single moms, people from every part of the county, every part of our community. So after these phone interviews, we invited the books to attend multiple, we gave them an option. We did multiple orientation sessions and invited them to come to one. And these were opportunities for the books to come meet us face to face and establish that trust. We found that it was very important that our books see us, see the space we were going to hold the event in, ask us questions. We did some kind of mock human library interactions and just, have a conversation. And make sure that they knew they were in good hands with us and that we were not exploiting their stories. So this is our first human library book collection here, 17 books from all across our county. Just a wonderful group of people that we became very protective and bonded with. One of the things I do want to acknowledge is that we did not have everybody in our community represented. We did not have anybody from the Latino community. We did do some outreach. The timing of this, there was some concern with some of the members of the Hispanic community that we spoke with that they were not ready to participate in this, but we could have done more to engage with that community, and that is on my list to improve that outreach for the next time. We also did not have anybody from the Jewish community. And again, I need to improve our outreach efforts for next time. But though our goal was 10 books and we had 17, I'm very happy with the diversity and the scope of the stories and just all of the various life lessons that we were able to learn from the books that we did have. 5 to 30 hours per staff. I'll get back to the timeline in a minute. Human library goals. So what were we trying to accomplish with all this? That's something our committee really thought hard about, and we developed some goals for the project. When we were doing orientations with our books, we discussed with them how to respond to inappropriate or insensitive questions. While we hoped no one would come in with any malicious intent or confrontational attitude, we wanted our books to feel comfortable declining to answer any questions they were not comfortable answering. So we talked about how to decline an answer, but also how to redirect and answer a related question. Really, though, many of our books already had this down and had practiced it their whole lives on a near daily basis. We had 2 books who were transgender people, and I heard both of them asked about their dead names multiple times. Our books who identified as Muslim also received some insensitive questions, but they did a really excellent job about turning those into teaching moments. So connecting people in our community with those they might not otherwise interact with, and helping them connect and understand each other as people was our primary goal. Facilitating that radical exchange of empathy, even if there were uncomfortable moments, was a high priority. We also wanted to teach our participants about othering, about pushing people into categories that are defined only by misunderstandings and stereotypes and not by individual actions. We also really wanted to encourage people-first language, identifying individual before a community or a group that they might be associated with, and they reject those they groupings. We also made sure that this was a Choose Civility initiative because we really wanted to register this ongoing initiative with current community engagement needs. And then again, we also wanted to establish the library as a place where everyone is welcome. We had staff present at all of the trainings, and then I'll go more into the staffing of the actual day as well. So what does a human library look like on the actual day? As our customer arrived, they would check in at the lobby. We had staff, I think 4 people stationed in our branch lobby, at our Miller branch in Ellicott City, and they would sign up for a time slot if they wanted the human books. We had each book give us a bio. We had them tell us, like, if I was a book, my title would be, and then they would give us their book title, and then they would write a 1-paragraph biography of themselves. So we handed those out so people could read them while they were waiting, and they could pick who they wanted to speak with. So they would sign up for a 15-minute time slot, or we would randomly match them with a book, the next available if they preferred. So we have a pretty large meeting space that accommodated all of these people. And each section had we had 3 sections with 5 or 6 books in each one. Each room had a room manager who escorted the readers to their book tables and tracked the timing of the interactions. We had staff loading and circulating, and answering questions, making sure our books were comfortable, helping people find the right tables, and making sure everybody got a break when they needed it. We invited everybody to participate. There was no prerequisite to participate as a reader. We did have staff circulating, and we told the books, if anybody is confrontational or a conversation is not productive, please signal us. We have a security officer here. We ended up not needing her. She participated as a reader because she didn't have anything else to do, which was wonderful. But we did, have a plan where if a reader was not there with an open mind, that we would just ask them to move on and, diffuse the conversation. One of the things you can't tell from the photos is that because we have this big open space, which is wonderful from a light and circulation and perspective, we piped in white noise. We just downloaded a white noise app onto an iPhone and piped it in through the speakers, and that helped muffle all the chatter and create some more intimacy for the conversations. So we didn't have to erect a lot of walls or put up baffling or anything to quiet the room. We just used our existing speaker system and a free white noise app to create some privacy during these emotional conversations, and that ended up being a really important element. A lot of our books brought their personal and cultural objects to help illustrate their personal stories, and those were really important elements. We brought out extra tables so that people could bring family photos. We had one of our Muslim books brought some beautifully illustrated Qurans with her to show to her readers that she was meeting with that day. There were a lot of family photos, and here you can see one of our books going through a family photo album, sharing her personal history with her reader. Our book here is a wonderful young man from Saudi Arabia who has just an amazing life story, and he was booked from the beginning of the day to the end of the day, nonstop. Just a wonderful young man who brought a lot of materials and personal history objects from his community and from his life in Saudi Arabia to share with his readers. We noticed that even when we had a slow moment, our books would bolt to each other's tables. So if somebody happened to have 5 extra minutes, they would go, the books would start reading each other very quickly. And so they liked interacting with each other and hearing each other's stories. So we had more than 200 people participate in that inaugural event, and that was in March of this year. We had kind of actually only allocated enough time slots to accommodate 175 people, but what we noticed was that people came in groups and participated in multi-generational groups as families. So though our age requirement for our books was to be 18 plus, we invited people of all ages to be readers. We decided early on that we wanted this to be open. There shouldn't be any age requirement to learn about another community, culture, religion, or anybody else. So we had young readers, we had 50 plus readers, we had readers from all across the community, and we really liked seeing these families come in and learn about these other communities and cultures that they were living next door to and really didn't know about. So it was really great to see that multi-generational interaction. A couple more of our wonderful books. There's Read Again and Meridian Storm, just really amazing volunteers who really gave a lot of their time. So here, just to give a little bit of scope on the project timeline, if you're thinking about doing one of this, in June of 2015, it goes all the way back to then, Alan Simpson proposed this as a Choose Civility initiative, and we brought it to our CEO and President, Valerie Gross, and she was very supportive. So we started the planning process there. It took about 3 weeks to get our approval. You do have to apply for an official license through the humanlibrary.org website, and it can take a few weeks to get a response there. So in July, we started our initial planning meetings and brainstorming sessions with our staff, alerting people that we were going to do this. We weren't sure, would this be something people were appreciating? Would people not like this? We weren't sure what the community response would be, but we decided to just roll with it and hope for the best, and that's really what we got. In December, we put out that call for book applicants. We did that online, in print, and social media. Most of them came in by social media. Sharing it on Facebook and was really the way that we got a lot of our applicants. We did do a lot of direct outreach, and we got a lot of volunteers from areas we didn't do outreach to, which was wonderful. It was really in the January and February timeframe that we really had to ramp up our focus and really invest our time when we were interviewing the books in January and February. So for those 28 books, it would take about an hour to schedule an interview, plan an interview, another hour to execute that interview, half an hour to follow up in conversation with the committee to decide if that book was one we were going to invite to be part of the day. And that's really where we started to really see we had no time for any other projects. We were really focusing almost full-time, some days on Human Library. So our human library was March 11th of this past year, 2016. We were 1 week out of the blizzard, which was fortunate. And it was just a wonderful day. We ran it for about 4 hours. We plan to stay with that time frame because, again, this is a really emotionally intensive day. And to do it for much longer, we think would be too much for our books to really go through and a lot for staff to go through. There's 4 hours was just about the perfect amount of time. Now, our thank you party and debrief, we had not originally planned, but our books really wanted the time to talk to each other. Our books really bonded with each other and with us throughout this whole process, and we wanted to acknowledge how much they had given to us as part of the community and helping us bring this for the first time to the community. And so we just threw a pizza party and we invited all of our books, and their families could come and they could finally sit down and have a time to talk with each other. Then, when they were sneaking in quick conversations during our human library and during orientation, but didn't have time to really, really share their full stories with each other. And they bonded. And there's actually, they've kind of formed a little club, and they go to other human libraries together, which I think is absolutely wonderful. And they participate together as human library books. So what did we learn at the debrief? We learned that they had not been asked to share their stories, and they were surprised people wanted to hear their story. They were surprised that a library would be doing this because they thought libraries would be too risk averse to engage with this kind of topic. And that was what surprised us the most, that we were coming off as we were playing it too safe. We tried to schedule that debrief as close to the actual date as possible. We did want to give it a little bit of time so that people could decompress and compose their thoughts. And honestly, the 2 to 3 week gap between the date of the library and the date of the debrief was more due to just heavily booked room schedule and the availability of spaces within the branch. We did invite all the books to give us their thoughts that day, but almost everybody was really emotionally drained. I mean, to tell your life story, to share these, stories of hate crimes and discrimination and just really painful topics, to relive those over and over and over again, became a little much. So we didn't ask people to really tell us too much of what was going on. One of the things we heard over and over again, though, from our books was by telling their own stories, they really started to understand their own journeys and how that journey had informed them as individuals that they are now and helped push them to their path to be the person that they wanted to be. So we were really just honored to be a part of that process with our books. So Johns Hopkins University Library also has done human libraries. We actually shared some of our books were at their library, and their coordinator and I talked, and we decided that we could start a human library book depot in Maryland. So we spoke to all of our books and asked them if they would like to be listed in a database where if another library in Maryland is hosting a human library, they could contact those books and invite them to participate alongside whoever else you'd like to invite in your community. So if you are in Anne Arundel County, per se, and you want to do a human library, once you receive your approval and registration from the international organization, you can contact us. We will give you access to our list of human library books that you could invite. It has their contact information, their book title, a summary of their life story. We're restricting access to that to only people who have been approved by the Human Library Organization as approved sites, just to protect the privacy of our books. But we're really excited to have that available and to help compel and support other libraries in Maryland to do their human library events as well. So our second human library, we're planning again for March of 2017, and that's another reason the book depot is so helpful is that we can kind of look at we can look at the schedule and see, well, if Towson's going to do one on, March 3rd, then I shouldn't do mine on March 4th because we're kind of competing for the same number of books and the same audience. Like, it helps us schedule around each other and just know when other libraries are doing their own events so that we can spread them out a little bit more. Right now we have about 20 people in the Book Depot. All right, so I'm going to also talk about another initiative, and then I'll take questions about both Human Library and this other initiative we have going on as part of our Choose Civility initiative. This one's called The Longest Table. This is the dinner party that I talked about, and I'm not going to go into as much detail as I did with the Human Library, but I did want to just talk a little bit about this event because it came together in a long time coming, basically. Just in June 28th of this last year, this last summer, a couple months ago, we invited 320 people to dinner at a very long table, a football length table. And I want to give you some background on that. We started planning a Main Street dinner in early 2016, thinking that this would be a great community building event. Their goal was to seat several hundred people at a table running through downtown Ellicott City, invite people to just sit down at a table with their neighbors, eat food from local farms and restaurants, talk to each other, just spend a wonderful evening together. We've been planning that for the summer of 2016, the fall of 2016, and we were really knee-deep making preparations when we really had a pretty horrific community tragedy. We had historic floods just decimate our downtown area, just about a mile and a half from our library branch. Flash floods rolled in, swept away cars, ruined storefronts. Water was 6 and 7 feet deep in places. The roads collapsed due to sinkholes. The river rose 13 feet out of its banks. 2 people died tragically. Hundreds of people were displaced from their homes. Dozens of businesses were destroyed. So at the same time, we really needed to have this dinner. We really needed to have this community experience, but we needed to give Ellicott City the time to recover physically from this flood. So we researched what other libraries and other communities were doing with their Main Street dinner and learned about a new concept called the longest table. Communities in Tallahassee, Florida and Dayton, Ohio had successfully hosted dinners for between 300 and 1,000 people in their cities. So we contacted those communities and they were willing to share information about their experiences and lessons that they learned with us. So if you look at the picture on the left of Dayton, that's actually on a bridge. They shut down their Peace Bridge and ran a table across the entire length of it, accommodated 500 people at their first event. And Tallahassee's, I think, was 500 at their first one as well, but they've had subsequent events that drew up to 1,000 people, as well as smaller monthly long table dinners that promotes the same community bonding on a smaller scale. So using that model, we planned and launched our own Choose Civility longest table on the campus of the Howard Community College. So again, at our inaugural event, we had 320 people. So here you see a table setting before the guests arrived, and this is we're standing about halfway, right at the midpoint. We sold 304 tickets in advance and another 16 on site. We had anticipated 330 people attending, so we were right on the nose for that. So that was wonderful. Tickets were subsidized by sponsors, so we were able to offer them at a pretty low cost of $15 for adults and $10 for high school and college students. So again, this table stretched the length of a football field through a parking lot. There were 44 connected tables. We assigned each one a color-coded dot. If I go back, you'll see the yellow, red, green, and blue dots lining the table. When people arrived, they were given a color-coded wristband with one of those dot colors and invited to sit anywhere that had an open seat near one of those colored dots. So people who arrived together, like if you came with a friend, you were asked to split up. So you sat next to people you didn't know, so you wouldn't lock into conversation. with somebody that you do know. We wanted you to talk to people you'd never spoken with before, much like the human library. We also, decorated the table with donated flowers. At the end of the night, we raffled those off as well as a take home. So this is a shot right from when things were arriving. You'll notice the staff is in the blue shirts, directing traffic. People were really overwhelmed at the sight of the long table, at this football field length table, and started to kind of bunch up at one end, but then we had to use our staff to encourage them to move all the way down. It did fill in really quickly. So lining the tables, you'll notice these green and blue circles to engage people and to encourage that conversation that we wanted to happen. We borrowed an idea from Dayton and left conversation starters on the table. We asked for volunteers to be kind of conversation facilitators. You'll see one here. This is just a community volunteer who wanted to attend, volunteered to be a conversation leader. So we asked them to come 10 minutes early, gave them a t-shirt, kind of introduced them to the conversation starters on the table. And we left markers and pens on the table so they could jot down their notes. But we really wanted people to talk to each other. See a question about the tables and chairs. The community college actually provided all of the tables and chairs for us out of their in-house supply, which was just a wonderful contribution from the community college. We really couldn't have pulled this off without them. So every table seated about 8 people, and the conversation starters are the same on the top and the bottom, so they're just mirrored from each other. If it had rained, which was really a concern for this area in June, we were going to move it into the quad, into the indoor kind of student center. We wouldn't have had a long table. We would have been broken up at a bunch of smaller tables, but we were really, really fortunate that even though we were in a black tarmac parking lot on a summer night in Maryland, it was like 76 degrees and sunny and with a cool breeze. It wasn't as miserable as a Maryland summer can definitely get. So we lucked out with the weather. Our menu was largely donated or in kind through local partners and restaurants. We did have it catered. Some elements of the meal were donated by local restaurants. Like the desserts came from one restaurant, the salad from another. But we offered a pretty simple menu, a garden salad with a couple of different salad dressing choices, chicken fettuccine with a dill sauce or a vegetarian option, bread, little tiny like bite-sized desserts, and then just unsweetened iced tea and chilled water. We didn't go elaborate. We opted not to involve alcohol. It didn't seem necessary. We wanted everybody to feel welcome, and it wasn't a logistic we were willing to tackle with this one. So we kept it simple, just like a family meal. So here's some of the visual impact of this. You can see how well this pulled together, how many people are sitting there together and talking. We actually rented a drone and had that fly above the table. I wish I had the footage back to share that with you. I don't yet, but to get the full scope of the length of the event, our photographer was standing on a ladder to be able to pull off these shots. The flowers, as beautiful as they were so big that the participants, their guests, couldn't see each other. So we had to set them off to the side, which is why they're kind of sitting on the ground now. But it was a really powerful scene. Just a few more shots here from the evening. So here you can really see the parking lot in this one. We had to do this when school was out. Timing was really crucial. We had to do it after summer classes were kind of on hold after a certain point, so that the community college could shut down the parking lot for us. We could set up. It did take all day to set this up. It took more than 2.5 hours just to put the tablecloth with the question map down. So here's a shot from the roof of the building next door. You can see our catering tents. Our wonderful caterers were running back and forth like you've never seen. They did a lot of foot traffic that night. Just a couple more really wonderful images from the evening. So this is some of the evidence that people left for us, that they had a good time, and that this was a powerful event, that this was a meaningful event. And we found that through the notes they left us on the table. These are just a couple samples of things that we documented, notes that people left. We wanted to encourage substantive, meaningful conversation, not just kind of that kumbaya, come together kind of event. We really wanted this to be meaningful, and we think we accomplished that. So a couple more notes here. So we weren't asking easy questions on these table runners. What's the biggest challenge facing our community? What would you change about our community? And we got great responses. People are dedicated to this community. They want to see it empowered. They want to see it better. They want everybody to feel included and welcomed. I think we're very lucky to have the people that we do living in our community, and that they would support this and that they would come out for it. So this is what it took to pull this off, though. We had a lot of partners. Definitely couldn't have done it without IMLS, our downtown partnership organization, the community college, just a huge number of supporters. You'll see the t-shirts here listing everybody. The whole back of the t-shirt was covered with sponsors. Those t-shirts were so popular. We only ordered them for staff, and when I tried to take them over to the caterers, people were trying to take them out of my arms. Like, they were begging me to sell them these t-shirts. We had not thought that would be something people would want, and hadn't even occurred to us, but they wanted a memento of this experience. So the day after the dinner, we did an email survey to everybody to get their feedback, and we offered them an opportunity at that point. If they wanted to buy a shirt, we would reprint them, and they could get one. So we were able to see people now in the community wearing them, which is kind of funny when you go to the grocery store, the gym, and you see a longest table t-shirt. So I just wanted to include this slide so you could see the scope of how it came together and what it took to bring people together. And we are planning to do this again in the fall of 2018. Because it's such an investment of time and energy and community resources, we do want to do it annually, but we want to stretch it out or spread them out a little bit more. So just in terms of all of these things, with Choose Civility, with the Human Library, with the longest table, what are our indicators of success? One was visibility. Then these are not in any particular order. Press coverage in social media. What were people saying in social media? We had a lot of press in the Baltimore Sun, in local print and TV, which was great. What is the attendance at our class and event? And, attendance is more than a number. We can have 5 people come to a conversation circle and still have an important evening. But we do have to be realistic and balance out, how much staff time are we investing versus, how many people are coming to these things. And we sometimes have to make difficult decisions. But overall, we think that the investment of staff time in all of these classes and events is really worth, whether we have 300 people or 5 people. We do surveys after everything and collect and analyze feedback to get a sense of how this resonated with our participants. Overwhelmingly, people are positive and find that these are important things for our community to be doing. And then, again, all those anecdotes. We had one woman who participated in both the Human Library and Come to the Longest Table, and afterwards she wrote me an email and she said, when the library does these things, it makes me feel like the community isn't as broken as I am sometimes led to believe it is. And that really stuck with us, that we can help people feel connected to their community and incorporated and involved. So Choose Civility is it started in Howard County, but anybody, any library, any organization, any community is welcome to join us. If you're in Maryland, we are having a Choose Civility Maryland Summit on November 17th at the Miller Branch in Ellicott City. So you're invited to participate in that and learn how you can become involved with Choose Civility, maybe start your chapter in your community. if you're outside of Maryland, you can still join as an affiliate or start your own chapter, and all the details there are at Choose2Bkind.org. So please visit our website there. And I'm sorry I forgot to put my email on the slide, but we can hand that out maybe through email if you want to reach out to me directly. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about Human Library, Longest Table, or Choose2Bkind. Okay, questions?
So this is Christine, and I've been making a list of questions as people have been posting them, some of which I think you've addressed. So as I go through...
Sorry, my audio is cutting out. Can you, I'm sorry.
No worries. I was basically saying that I've been making note of questions, some of which you addressed along the way. So I'm telling the attendees, if you feel like I'm skipping your question, pop it back in. But I want to make sure that we can address all of them. One of the questions was, did you vet your books? And I heard you say that you did interviews with them. Could you tell us a little bit more about how you maybe vetted your books for the Human Library?
Yeah, we just kind of wanted to make sure people knew what they were getting into when we invited them to be a book, that they understood the scope. We asked people to come to us to share their stories of prejudice, discrimination, bias, or things in that kind of vein of experience. And we got some people that had experienced unkindness that was not necessarily discrimination. And so we did have to kind of prioritize. It's difficult to make a value judgment on anybody's experience. But we did try and highlight stories that are not easily accessed, that might not otherwise find a platform to be shared. And the people I think there were only three applicants that we kind of just scratched totally, as they were just not really suited for the project. But a lot of people, once we explained the scope of it, kind of self-withdrew and declined to participate. They realized that they responded kind of on a whim to the application form, but upon further discussion, kind of realized it wasn't for them. But that's why we had two people on every call, because we didn't want one person to make the full assessment. We wanted to compare kind of our impressions of the story, of the individual's ability to tell their story, and kind of have a conversation about if we thought that they were a good candidate to be a book.
All right. And the next question, it's actually come up a couple times. Do you have a guide for either the Human Library or for the Longest Table?
We have like a one-sheeter that I'm happy to share by email that just kind of gives a very general overview of our goals and kind of the scope of the project. I'm also happy to have a phone conversation with anybody and kind of just talk to you about our experience, answer direct questions that are not answered by our one-sheet summary. The Human Library website has a lot of resources as well, and a lot of great how-tos. We took a lot of our cues from their resource pool on their website.
Okay. And this question, excuse me, has also come up a couple times. Were staff books also? Like, did they serve dual roles?
They didn't. Well, yes and no. We did have staff that acted as books, but when they were books, they were not our staff. So it's kind of a fine HR line there. So when we had staff that approached us about being a book, we asked them to go through the same process as everybody else, and just then had a second conversation that just basically said, if you're highlighted as a book, just know that you'll be representing yourself and not the library at the event. So we did have a couple staff books because we have amazing staff with amazing stories, and we didn't want to not use their stories as part of the experience. But they weren't also volunteering in another capacity at the time. They were there on their own time and their own initiative.
Okay. Do you have any plans to use books for other programs? So maybe like having somebody do a longer presentation where there could be more Q&A for a larger group?
We had talked about doing kind of like a panel debrief or a panel conversation with some of the books afterward. We didn't do it at the time because we weren't sure what the response was going to be. I think for the second one, we'll do more with our books, either a public reception or kind of a panel conversation where people can share their stories. One of the values of this event was, though, we did make a lot of connections with the community. So if we wanted to do a class on inclusivity, and I wanted to invite somebody to speak about Sikh culture, I now know who I can call. This was very helpful for us too. So we really valued the connections that this helped us develop within the community. So we didn't do it at the time. It's kind of something we're hoping to work in the future.
Okay. And I think you said that there were about 20 people that are part of the Human Library Book Depot. Mm-hmm. Does that just include people in Maryland?
Yeah, it's just Maryland right now, and it's mostly books from the Howard County Human Library and the Johns Hopkins Human Library. And we asked the books, would you be okay? Do you want to volunteer to be in our depot? You may be contacted by other libraries about their human library program if you are. And some declined just because life is busy, but others were really enthusiastic, and they see a lot of value in this type of initiative and being able to share these experiences in this kind of unconventional format. So they were excited to volunteer for that.
Okay. And you showed a couple examples of ways that you were getting some feedback from both events. Did you also do surveys to attendees afterwards?
We did for the longest table. We emailed everybody a survey afterwards because they had to register online. Mm-hmm. We handed out paper surveys at the Human Library and got a few back, but that we didn't require people to register in advance, so we didn't collect emails from the readers. So we got a handful of handwritten responses, which were really enthusiastic and supportive, but not very substantive. So we need to look at how we can better capture that feedback for the next one. We did do a survey for our books and ask them what we can do better, what we could do differently, what we should keep the same. And really the only thing that people disagreed about was the length of time. Like, everybody was encouraging and supportive and really appreciated this opportunity and saw value in this opportunity. Some people thought that the conversation should be 5 minutes and some thought they should be 30 minutes. So I think it just depended on, the personality of the book that was responding as to how they process the timing factor of the individual reading conversations.
And how long were your sessions for the books? You may have mentioned that.
We allocated 20 minutes per book and reader, but the readings were actually only 15 minutes because we wanted to give the books a 5-minute break in between in case they wanted to grab a bottle of water or something like that. In just a chance to catch their breath. And then each book also, we scheduled them for like a half-hour break in the middle of the day somewhere so that they could get off the floor and, sit quietly and just get some lunch, that kind of stuff. So some of those readings ran really long. We'd really have to break into those conversations. That was one thing that we noticed across the board was that it's really hard to shut down these emotionally intense conversations. And at one point we thought about having timers on the table, but they thought that would be too disruptive and, kind of a visually unpleasant, to kind of be timed in these interactions. So we just had our staff act as kind of moderators who would come in and say, it's time to bring in our next reader, time to wrap up.
Okay. So it is like 1 minute to 3. What I think I'll do is really quickly do some closing information, and then if Allison doesn't mind and people who are with us today don't mind, I have about 4 more questions that people had asked, but I want to make sure that if people need to go that we can get some wrap-up information, if that sounds okay with folks.
Sure.
So as we are wrapping up the last session for today, we want to definitely thank Allison for being here today and for sharing all of this great ideas, a really powerful way to end our session for today. But we also want to thank everybody who attended today, whether you attended one session or all of them. Your interaction and engagement has just been wonderful. If you do have questions, please don't hesitate to contact your state library's continuing education coordinator. Once again, once you leave today's webinar, you should receive a survey on the presentation. We definitely appreciate your feedback. If you don't receive it when you log out, we will be emailing all of the registrants. And it has been my pleasure, and I think I can speak on behalf of the other people who presented today as well as those of us who coordinated. It has been a distinct pleasure to spend the day with you all. So if you can stay, I have just a few more questions for Allison, and then we will wrap up for the day. Okay. One of the questions about the longest table was asking if you had any issues with people kind of showing up in groups but not necessarily kind of doing a good job of communicating the way that you had hoped.
Well, when they did arrive in groups, we worked really hard to split them up. We didn't really have anybody that was a holdout in terms of conversation. And honestly, there probably were a couple people that arrived together that then snuck in and sat together. We couldn't police that detail, but by and large, people really embraced that aspect of I'm going to come in and not know anybody, which is a hugely uncomfortable thing to do for anybody, to just walk into a room and not know anybody at the party. But since everybody was in the same position, there was equal footing in that regard, and conversation really did flow very well. People engaged. People took we noticed a lot of phones come out to take selfies and just capture the scene, but by and large, people stayed off their phones and really engaged around them.
Nice, nice. For the Human Book Project, did you try to get a balance of political opinions for your books at all?
We really kept it as nonpartisan as possible. We didn't really focus on politics as much as we did personal experience, and personal experience is of course informed by politics, but we had a book who was a conservative Christian. So we used that, as that was kind of the opposite spectrum of what a lot of our books came from, but we felt it was important to include that person who identified as a conservative Christian, because they had experienced discrimination and stigma based on their identity, and it ran a spectrum. I would say we sought out to be as balanced and as nonpartisan as possible in terms of recruiting our books, and really focus more on that life experience than that political perspective.
Okay, and I think I'm down to my last question. Have you thought about doing any documentation for the Human Book Project, something like a book or maybe a podcast where people share their stories, or do you think that would interfere with the intimacy of the event?
We did kind of think about that, and we decided that it was better, we would get better responses from books that knew that those conversations were private. We had a book we had a couple books who had really legitimate privacy concerns. One of our books, through sharing his story, he was putting his life at risk. If he had gone back to his home country and shared his story there, he would not be alive. And that was the level of intensity that we were dealing with, and we really needed to respect our books for being willing to share those stories despite these risks. So we opted not to record anything, just to respect our book's privacy. And also, people share in conversations, like our readers were sharing things about themselves as well, because that's how they identify their experience and find their points of access to our experience. So recording them, it didn't sit well with us at the time. There might be a way to expand the project in more of kind of like a Humans of New York kind of way, but at this point we're leaving them just between the reader and the book.
All right. Well, I think hopefully I have addressed everybody's questions, or they were addressed during the session. Once again, a final thank you to Allison and all of our presenters for today's session. It's been a really enlightening, informative, and I think inspiring day.
Thank you.
This is Alicia from Iowa. I want to also say thank you to everybody and agree with Christine. This has been a wonderful day. Thank you, Allison. I know some of our other presenters are still in the room. Thanks to all of you. And thanks to my colleagues from other states. And my goodness, I think we have to give a special shout out to Dorcas Davis from Georgia, who has done a fantastic job with the technology and everything else today.
This is Nini from Maryland, and I second that. This has been wonderful. Thank you, Dorcas Davis and the Georgia Public Library Service for inviting us to work in this way. And thank you so much to all of our presenters and participants. It's been great.
Dorcas, thank you, everyone. See you next year.